This is the Destroy Manila podcast, where we talk about the sport of mixed martial arts and fight culture in the Philippines and in Asia. The Pinoy stick fighting style of Arnis has been featured in many popular movies. We've seen it used by Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible 3 and by Matt Damon in the Bourne Identity series. Of course, one of the coolest OG examples is Enter the Dragon, where Bruce Lee kicks ass with a doble baston. So, Hollywood really likes FMA. Pero bakit mukhang mas appreciated ng Western action movies ang Arnis at FMA? Habang sa atin, hindi siya ganun kasikat. That's just one of the questions we'll try to answer. I'm Karl, with my co-host JC.
What's up, fight fans?
We are the Destroy Manila podcast, and this is one of our documentaries. On this episode of The Roots of Pinoy Fight, we'll talk about the highlights in the history of Arnis and how many modern-day Filipino MMA fighters can trace their origins to its practice, dual culture, and philosophy. We asked Jay Ignacio, the director of The Bladed Hand, which is one of the definitive documentaries on FMA, about why Arnis is so popular abroad, pero dito hindi.
Dito kasi, Arnis has a very grassroots personality. So, hindi siya ma-showbiz. I think the only times na pa-showbiz ang Arnis really would be when Roland Dantes was still around. And those are old movies na that nobody has access to unless you have the pirated versions or the illegal uploads on YouTube, di ba? I think it's subpar only in method of promotion, not the actual art. Kasi, see, there's also a thrill in digging into these things and going to places and looking for people who teach this, and then you'll hear stories, and then there's also the thrill in trying to substantiate it. Totoo ba? O pakita nyo nga sa akin yung mga ganun, di ba?
We also interviewed renowned MMA coach and FMA practitioner Gabay Forlales.
Unang-una siguro dahil sa paibang bansa, exotic siya. Kakaibang bagay. So, isa sa mga pinakamalaking factor yon. Hindi siya typical. Pangalawa, yung kultura ng Pilipino, we are very much, It is. Hindi natin mapipigilan eh. Diba? Mahal ko ang Pilipinas, pero it still is iba yung ginagawa natin eh. Biggest thing pa rin natin sa sports sa Pilipinas is Taekwondo, Korean art. Ibang level yung pag-angat ng Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And this particular thing, binibigyan sila talaga ng magagandang exposure. Magaganda kasi yung tournaments nila. Because of the tournaments, nagkakaroon ng magandang exposure, mas nakikilala. Sad to say, yung Arnis doesn't have that. Kaya hindi natin mabigyan ng atensyon, di ba?
Madaming tawag sa stick fighting. Pero ngayon, ang umbrella term na lang ay Filipino Martial Arts, or FMA. Though there are so many variants according to system and location, it's said that the three most dominant schools of FMA, before it was all organized, were Arnis, Kali, and Eskrima. This is according to books like Mga Karunungan sa Larong Arnis and The Filipino Martial Arts, which was written by Dan Inosanto, one of Bruce Lee's students. Bagaman madaming masters, decentralized at disorganized sila. Pero the books state that all FMA styles originated from a common mother art called Kali, which predates the arrival of the Spaniards. This root art that used blades had to evolve into stick fighting because of suppressive events in Spanish colonial history, which we'll tackle later. We asked Jay Ignacio about this original mother art.
So now there's a story about Kali being the mother art of all Filipino martial arts supposedly, and that it was what the Moros called their martial art, and that was only taught in secret, under moonlight, yung mga ganyan. This was according to some of the Pinoys who immigrated to the States before World War II and told stories like this. But then when you talk to the Moros, it's a different story. They're like, huh? There's no record, there's no proof. I know of some people claiming na the Arnis that I practice is what Lapu-Lapu practice, and this was handed down to me or to my family. I know of some people na ganun. But the thing is, how do you prove that, diba? So if you're gonna claim something, really, the burden is on you to prove that. In the day and age of Google, there's also a lot of misinformation that is put up on the web. So now, how do you discern, diba? I think you have to cross-reference tales like that with a historical timeline that is unrelated to the martial arts. Now you gotta check. Oh, this happened This became the kingdom of this portion. What did the Sultanate of Sulu look like geographically? And what did they trade?
Nakakaingit nga yung ibang martial arts na nung panahon pala ng 1940 something, 1960, meron pang mga newspaper clippings. Luta Libre, meron sila newspaper clippings nung panahon naman nakikipagbugbugan sila sa mga Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Yun yung problema ng Filipino arts. Wala tayong written account.
Since Filipinos had to keep Arnis secret from the Spaniards, it had to evolve from the use of bladed weapons to sticks as a disguise. Why? FMA historians cite that Miguel Lopez de Legazpi's crew in 1564 were first welcomed by sparring demos using bladed weapons. Seeing how well the locals were sa paggamit ng sandata, kinabahan ng mga Espanyol, so they banned the study and practice of swordsmanship. Sa panahon na yon, sticks replaced blades at ang kali blade fighting ay tinawag na Eskrima stick fighting. Mula noon hanggang 1800s, dahil sa colonial ban, the only way they could pass the art on from generation to generation was through oral lessons. Ituturo ng ama sa anak at ituturo ng anak sa anak niya. Tinago ang practice sa pamamagitan ng sayaw tulad ng pandango sa ilaw and tinikling. Pero ang oral na pagtuturo ay naging dominant na paraan para maipass on ang art bago nagkaroon ng commercial na school system. We asked Gabay Forlales about the environment and context that birthed the commonality of Arnis techniques.
Unang-una, kagaya ng palagi ko sinasabi, kaya Arnis ang martial arts ng Pilipino because of geographical factor. Madaming dagat, madaming bukirin, madaming bundok. So ang trabaho na ninuno natin, magsasaka, mangingisda, mangangahoy. Ano ang common tools nila? Itak na nakasukbit sa balakang. So kung mapapaaway ako sa'yo, hindi ko ibababa yung itak at magsusuntukan tayo para maging boksingero ko. Or hindi ako sisipa ng mataas. Ang una kong gagawin is kukunin ko yung itak ko at makikipag-away ako sa'yo.
Gabay also pointed out that majority of the Arnis grandmasters had very blue-collar backgrounds.
Totoong may mga malalaking chance sa kanila. Totoong may mga manginginom sa kanila. Pero huwag natin kakalimutan, nagtatrabaho sa bukid to. Malalakas yung farmer's strength yan. Yung functional na strength ng mga to, matindi. And they recover well. Kasi bago magtakip silim, walang wifi, tulog yung mga yan. Nakakapagpahinga at maganda yung sa point of view ng siyensya, ang ganda ng growth hormone yan, bomba yan pagdating ng alas 8 dahil tulog na siya, nakakain siya na maayos, maganda yung hangin. So technically, itong mga to, kahit wala yung science ng strength and conditioning at recovery, may isang factor na tumulong sa kanila. Matino pa yung mundo ng panahon nila.
It's said that what we call modern Arnis came into being and developed the most between World War II in 1941 and Philippine independence in 1946. But commercial FMA clubs were already operating since the 1920s, when Pinoy migrant workers brought FMA to Hawaii and California during that decade. This is the period that today's FMA teachers cite as the dividing line between old school and modern FMA. Those who learned FMA back then didn't pay with money. You courted FMA teachers, paid with loyalty, and there were no trophies after fighting. But techniques were earned in blood, sweat, and tears, a far thing from today's uniforms, tuition fees, ranks, and formal curriculums. Noong panahon ng US occupation, ginamit ang Arnis laban sa Americans noong Balangiga Massacre sa Sabah. And it also saw heavy use noong World War II when guerrilla fighters and military units like the famous Bolo Battalion fought the Japanese occupiers. Jay Ignacio talked about the old school way of training.
There are teachers who aren't really grandmasters in the way we define a grandmaster na may certificate siya or, his teacher, gave him a rank or whacked him in the head to, seal the deal na, something like that. Or pinaso ng kandila or whatever. Diba? There are a lot of romanticized methods of teaching also. But I think in the places that do not have any commercial system, those who teach lang in private or some may consider their martial art as something of an heirloom, they tend to behave that way then. Na parang this is something we treasure and it should be passed on to the right people only. So I can't tell you all my secrets. One important thing is, he would be considered parang may sigong, is the teacher of my teacher.
Okay.
Si Tatang Ilustrisimo. So I learned under Tony Diego and also Arnold Narzo. So parang sigong ko si Tatang. I never met him.
Unang-una, sa old school, wala namang kaming set curriculum eh. Darating ka, may maiisipang ibigay sa'yo yung teacher mo. He would just create out of nowhere a drill for you to follow. Gagawin niya lang yun on the fly. Habang ginagawa mo yun, may manonotice siya na mali sa ginagawa mo. Probably a misstep, an angle sa footworks mo. Bukas na bukas, magugulat ka, yun yung lessons nyo. So wala kami ng set curriculum. By gut feel yung ibibigay sa'yo ng teacher mo. Walang tuition kasi wala naman akong naging teacher na may sariling eskwelahan. Most of the teachers na nakuha ko, mga nasa probinsya, nabibisitahin mo, papaturo ka, medyo maliligawan mo, baka tanggapin ka bilang estudyante. May mga times na magdadala ka ng regalo, magdadala ka ng saging, dadala ka ng kung ano mang regalo mo sa kanya, tutulong ka sa bahay nila, kung may mga kailangan buhatin. If you can see yung mga old kung fu movies, nakakatawa kasi parang ganun siya eh. Ang masaya pa nito is masakit siya pag nauulit. Literally, masakit siya pag nauulit. Ang reinforcement ng mga teachers ko is kaltok eh. Kasi papatamaan ka talaga yung stick niya. And nasa sa'yo yan kung babalik ka o hindi na.
Ang template ng modern FMA school ay ang Labangon Fencing Club of Cebu, ang unang commercial weapons-based martial arts school sa Pilipinas na itinayo ni na Lorenzo and Song sa Avedra noong 1920. Dito na nag-merge ang old school at new school at dito na rin naging popular ang kultura ng duelo sa FMA or ang tinatawag na Wego Todo. Ang Wego Todo o kadalasang no-holds-barred match ang natural na resulta ng pagdami ng mga FMA clubs. Hindi na maiwasang magkaroon ng rivalry. Payabangan pagalingan ng styles. While sparring was common na pampalipas oras, ang Wego Todo sa Visayas, lalo na para sa mga Cebuano, ay ginagamit din to resolve bad blood sa format ng duelo. FMA Oral History has stories tungkol sa mga old school teachers o practitioners na sumasali sa Wego Todo. Mainly dahil ang pagkapanalo dito ay magandang paraan to promote their school and style. Wego Todo fighters would sign waivers sa harap ng mga taong magsisilbing witnesses sa magaganap na laban at kailangan mag-agree kung paano matatapos ang laban. Ititigil sa unang masusugatan, pagsuko o pagkamatay. We asked Jay Ignacio what a Wego Todo match looked like.
From my understanding is that it's a no-holds-barred challenge. Now it's up to the two to choose what weapons. But then I don't know who referees, diba? Under what conditions do you call a halt na to the fight? There are stories. I think the most sensational one was not really a fight na may na-injure or ano, but it was a challenge that came out of talagang hatred for each other. Away, they couldn't stand each other talaga. Si the late Kakoy Cañete and Ising Atilio. And there's a picture of Kakoy locking. Pareho sila nakatayo pero hinedlock niya si Atilio. So, and apparently that was against the rules. So may rules pala yung duel nilang gano'n. And I know this was held in front of a lot of people. It might have been held in a park or something where a lot of people were watching.
Gabay Forlales explained that though there are rules, yung heavily oral tradition is prone to abuse, especially when it came to sino ba talaga nanalo.
Ano yung rules na ginagamit? Kuha ka ng stick mo, kuha ko ng sticks ko. Walang reklamuhan kung gaano kakapal yung stick mo, kung gaano kahaba, gaano kanipis. Wala akong pakialam doon, basta ang iintindihin ko kung ano yung choice of weapon ko. Yes, hindi siya yung barbaric lang na baala na kayo. Gaya ng mga Japanese art, may certain sets of honor ng mga Filipino fighters. Kaya nga, kasama din yung rules doon na isang usapan. Pag nabitawan ng sticks, let's be honest, kung itak yan, wala ka na ipapalo sa akin. Mapapatay na kita. Kaya nga, di ba, ang usapan din dati, nauso yung waiver, ginagawa naman talaga nila dati yon. May mga Wego Todo na out in public, especially yung mga panahon na nagsisimula na sumikat yung isang fighter. Asahan mo pag piyesta ng village nila, ng bayan nila, dadayuhin para hamunin. Madaming eyewitnesses. Kung sino yung estudyante ko at estudyante mo, yun ang kasama natin. Kaya madalas din, na ang kasunod ng Wego Todo ng dalawang Grandmaster would be the Wego Todo ng dalawang estudyante niya. May certain sets of honor na ina-uphold Kailangan proteksyon ng kulpa din yung estilo natin Kailangan ingatan ko na tinalo mo ko, palalabasin kong fluke yan. So yung estudyante mo naman tatalunin ko. Nangyayari. So paano siya prone to abuse? Wala naman documented kasi, or kung meron man, napakakonti ng actual na huwego todo na laban. Ano ang mangyayari? Kasi oral tradition siya eh. So kapag ako ang nagkwento, mas magaling yung teacher ko.
Despite the sometimes tall and sometimes outright fantastic tales of Huego Todo death matches, it's only recently that Arnis as a sport and form of martial fitness gained formal support from the government. Grandmaster Remy Presas first introduced his own system to the students of the National College of Physical Education when he was teaching there in 1969. While there was some interest to organize in the 90s, it was only in 2006 that the National Training of Trainers in Arnis and Dance Sports was instituted. A few months later, Arnis was included in the Palarong Pambansa program. FMA was only proclaimed the official national martial art and sport of the Philippines in January 2010. Here's Jay again.
Pagdating sa non-sporting aspect ng Arnis or Eskrima, yung kanya-kanyang teacher, bahala sila magturo ng sarili nilang technique. But if you're gonna compete, eto yung rules na lahat, whether you are modern Arnis, whether you are Northern Luzon style or Bisaya, or if you're Kuntaw Silat na makiki-Arnis ka, eto yung rules. I think the only time you need to get people united under a banner is when it comes to the sports aspect. Because if you're gonna push for this to be a national sport, then there has to be national rules. You know, across the board, ito yung rules ng paluan natin, ito yung rules ng scoring natin, itong rules ng refereeing natin, itong rules ng uniform natin. It is important, but it's not the only way to achieve the athleticism or the propagation of the martial art. It is a gateway. One of the gateways into the generic pool that we call Arnis or Eskrima. There are many ways in, and there's no hard and fast rule na it's only the sporting aspect that will accomplish that. But it's an important gateway.
Ngayon, mixed martial arts na ang pinakasikat na commercial form ng sports combat. Maraming Filipino cage fighters ang nagsimula sa practice ng FMA or may FMA background. Katulad nila Jerry Crank Legaspi, One Championship fighter Chris Nalimbaga at URCC founder Professor Alvin Aguilar. Sila at maraming katulad nila ang nagsasabing ang FMA at ang kultura ng duelo sa Huego Todo ay isa sa pundasyon ng kanilang martial arts at competition mentality. Tulad na lang ni Gabay Forlales, dahil sa background niya in FMA, he created the striking protocol system. Ito ay isang system na heavily inspired ng FMA concepts and techniques. He uses it to teach striking arts like boxing, Dutch kickboxing, and Muay Thai to beginners, amateurs, and pro fighters. Nakita niyang nagtatranslate ng maganda ang FMA ideas sa system niya.
Malalim yung influence ng Filipino martial arts simply because ang number one na idea ko pagdating sa striking is hindi mo gustong gumawa ng mga movement na unnecessary. Sa Arnis, sa Eskrima, sa Kali, kung ano mang itatawag sa kanya. Pag nagdagdag ka ng mga extra movement ng walang saysay, ikamamatay mo. Or ikababasag mo ng bungo. Or ikapipilay mo. So, ginawa ko siya na hanggat maaari, streamlined. Pangalawa, I'm using the idea sa Arnis na may numbering system. Arnis system has different method, iba-ibang grupo, may 12 striking, may 7 striking, may 5 strikings, may 3 strikings. Sa striking protocol, we do that too. Nakit ko na siya to another notch by making sure na yung striking system is very, very fluid, kagaya rin ng sa Arnis. So, sa Arnis, you have to rely on stimulus. Kung magsisimula ka sa audio stimulus, sabihin ng coach mo, ng guru mo, ng master mo na, sangga sa kaliwa, sangga sa kanan, palo sa ibabaw, buhat araw, saksak, labtik, ibang witik, abangiko. Then you do it. Ganun din tayo sa striking protocol. We have a numbering system that relies on audio signals and visual signals. Then before you know it, gumagalaw ka nang hindi na nagsasalita. Naglalaro na kayo together.
As MMA continues to grow, and more Filipino cage fighters are turning to practice FMA, how can the current platform of FMA competition be further developed? Si Jay Ignacio advocates celebrating diversity.
If you look at the way Filipino martial arts groups operate today, whether they're formal organizations or private instruction groups, tribes, let's call them, they function the same way that Filipino LGUs function. Very tribal pa rin yung mindset. What we need in order to evolve is first the awareness of needing to evolve. And then it requires big picture thinking. Na, sige, eto yung identity ng tribe ko. Eto naman yung identity ng tribe niya. Eto yung sa inyo. Iba-iba tayo. And we will never be the same. So, one of the statements I encountered in the production of Bladed Hand was, instead of fighting to unite, why not just celebrate the differences?
While Gabay Forlales advocates getting more creative students and a tournament sports system with unified rules.
Eh, ang problema, kukunti yung practitioner ng Arnis ngayon, pati hindi nag-i-evolve. Sino kasi nagpa-practice? Sino mag-i-innovate? Napakakonti ng actual na practitioner ng Arnis para magkaroon ng innovation. If you would look at Arnis competition right now, and the only thing you will see is the anyo, yung mga dance form. Sino mag-i-innovate? Pero it is a very, very dynamic art. O ngayon, ang problema natin sa Arnis, each Arnis association will have their own tournament. And in each tournament, they will have their own bias scoring system. Until tanggalin natin yung politika ng bias, ng estilo ko ang mas mahusay sa'yo, until magkaroon tayo ng isang unified scoring system na meron ng jiu-jitsu, na meron ng taekwondo, na meron ng judo, na meron ng wrestling, Arnis will always be an art na nasa background.
Obviously, we've just scratched the surface, and the culture and practice of Arnis is insanely deep. We encourage you to find out more about it, how it has influenced modern martial systems, and maybe find a local Arnis teacher near you and try it out for fun.
Ang Destroy Manila podcast ay tungkol sa MMA at fight culture sa Pilipinas at sa Asia. We'll talk about fighters and their coaches, inspiring stories, and complex issues that often go on behind the scenes and beyond the cage. We highlight not just the amazing performances, but also the real blood and grit that goes into every fight. You just listened to an episode of The Roots of Pinoy Fight, the mini documentaries of Destroy Manila podcast. This is a series that traces and tackles the origins and context of how modern martial arts developed sa Pilipinas. Ako si JC Reyes,
Ako si Karl Mesa.
ang inyong mga podcast hosts. Salamat sa aming mga guests sa episode na ito. Si Jay Ignacio, ang director ng Bladed Hand, at si Gabay Forlales, ang Brawler's Lab. Ang episode na ito ay ni-record at distributed by Puma Podcast, produced by Carl Joe Javier and audio edited by Nina Toralba. You can follow the podcast sa aming Facebook at Destroy Manila, Instagram at Destroy Manila Podcast, Twitter at Destroy Manila Podcast, and sa aming YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you at the fight.